He was the man the entire city feared. A single decision from him could make someone vanish from the map. But that night, in a luxury restaurant, Luca Rossi stood frozen, not because of an enemy, not because of guns or betrayal, but because the one woman he trusted above all else was smiling at another man. And in that moment, Luca understood a dangerous truth. His power was no longer absolute. Luca Rossi walked into the restaurant just before midnight, exactly as planned. The place was discreet, refined, designed for men who preferred privacy over noise, power over attention. He had chosen it dozens of times before for quiet negotiations, deals that shifted cities without leaving fingerprints. Tonight was supposed to be no different. A short meeting, a controlled conversation, then back to the world he ruled with precision. He took 10 steps inside before everything went wrong. His gaze moved instinctively, scanning the room the way it always did, registering exits, faces, movement. Then it stopped. Not because of danger, not because of a threat, but because of a woman sitting at a small table near the window, bathed in warm light. Olivia Parker, his assistant, his right hand, the woman who managed his schedule down to the minute, who stood beside him through meetings that broke lesser people. She was not supposed to be here, not tonight, not like this. And she was not alone. She was smiling. Not the polite, professional curve of her lips he saw at the office, not the careful expression she wore when dealing with him. This smile was softer, unguarded, almost shy. It did something strange to his chest. His heartbeat slowed for half a second, then slammed hard enough that he felt it in his throat. The man sitting across from her leaned forward, saying something that made her laugh quietly. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing against her hand in a way that was casual, intimate, familiar. Luca stopped hearing the restaurant. The clink of glasses, the low music, the murmured conversations all faded into nothing. The only sound left was the echo of a single question pounding in his head, again and again, with increasing force. Who is this guy? His jaw tightened without him realizing. His body moved on instinct as he took a seat at a nearby table, close enough to see, far enough to pretend distance. He did not touch the menu. Food had become irrelevant. All that mattered was the way Olivia leaned slightly forward, the way her shoulders looked relaxed, the way she seemed lighter. She looked nothing like the woman who sat outside his office every morning, spine straight, eyes focused, always braced for his demands. Tonight, her hair fell loosely around her shoulders. Her blouse was simple but flattering. Under the soft lights, she looked warmer, more alive. Happy. That realization burned deeper than jealousy. Luca watched the man laugh, too loudly for his liking. Watched him hold Olivia's attention as if it belonged to him. Something dark stirred in Luca's chest, something sharp and dangerous. He had spent years mastering control, over markets, over men, over himself. Yet here he was, undone by a smile that was not meant for him. When the man stood and excused himself, pushing his chair back as if he owned the space, Luca felt his muscles tense. He was already on his feet before he consciously decided to move. His body recognized opportunity before his mind did. He crossed the short distance between the tables with steady steps. Olivia was studying the menu when she sensed him. She looked up and froze. Luca, her voice wavered. Her fingers tightened around the glass in her hand. "What are you doing here?" He stopped beside her table, his expression calm, controlled, the kind of calm that unsettled people who knew him well. His eyes, however, were sharp, dark, fixed entirely on her. "I could ask you the same thing," he said evenly. "But I don't need to. I can see exactly what this is." Her cheeks warmed. She stood slowly, meeting his gaze despite the tension crackling between them. "You're mistaken." "Mistaken," his voice dropped a fraction. "I don't make mistakes." "This is dinner," Olivia replied, her tone firmer now. "That's all." "Dinner," Luca repeated, as if tasting the word. "With a man who touches your hand." She lifted her chin. "That's not your concern." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Everything involving you is my concern." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Olivia's eyes widened, then hardened. For a heartbeat. Neither of them spoke. The air between them felt tight, electric, stretched to its limit. "My work is your concern," she said quietly. "My life is not." The conviction in her voice caught him off guard. He was not used to being challenged, especially not by her. Before he could respond, footsteps approached. The man returned, stopping short when he saw Luca. "Oh," he said awkwardly, glancing between them. "You must be Luca Rossi. Olivia mentioned you." He extended his hand. "Nice to meet you." Luca did not take it. Silence fell heavy. The man's hand lingered, then dropped. He laughed nervously, trying to diffuse the tension. "Right. Okay, leave," Luca said softly. Too softly. Olivia turned sharply. "No, you don't get to decide that." The man hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, I don't want any trouble. Then go," Luca replied, his gaze never leaving Olivia. She had never raised her voice at him before. "Enough," she said, sharp and clear. "You don't control this. Not tonight, not ever." With that, she took the man's arm and guided him back to their table. The gesture was deliberate. Final. Luca stood there, unmoving, his chest tight in a way he did not recognize. This was not anger alone. It was something worse. Fear, possession. The sudden realization that he was watching something slip out of his grasp. He turned and left the restaurant without another word. Outside, the cold night air hit him hard. He barely felt it. His driver opened the car door, and Luca paused, glancing back through the window. Inside, Olivia was smiling again. Not at him. At the other man. The image burned. As the car pulled away, Luca stared ahead, his face composed, his thoughts anything but. "Find out who he is," he said quietly. "Everything. Tonight, back at the restaurant." Olivia exhaled slowly, her hands trembling just enough that she had to curl them into fists to steady herself. The man beside her watched her with concern. "Are you okay?" she nodded, forcing a small smile. "Yes, I'm sorry about that." He shook his head. "You don't owe me an apology." He hesitated, then added gently, "I should probably tell you something." She looked up, confused. "I wasn't actually trying to date you," he admitted. "Your cousin asked me to take you out. She said you worked too much, that you needed a normal night. I thought you knew." Olivia's breath caught. "What?" He smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry. I thought this was clear." The truth settled slowly, heavily. Across the city, Luca Rossi sat in the back of his car, convinced he had just watched his assistant choose another man. And that misunderstanding was about to change everything. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. Morning arrived with a sharpness Olivia Parker had not expected. The city looked the same from the sidewalk outside the glass tower where she worked. But something inside her had shifted overnight. She stood there longer than usual, fingers tightening around the strap of her bag, replaying the scene at the restaurant despite her effort not to. Luca's voice. His eyes. The way he had looked at her as if she were both his responsibility and his mistake. She told herself it meant nothing. It had been an interruption. Nothing more. A misunderstanding that would dissolve under daylight and routine. Luca was her boss. He had no claim over her evenings, her choices, her life. Repeating it in her head did not make it easier to believe. Upstairs, the executive floor was already awake. Screens glowed softly. The hum of the coffee machine filled the air. Olivia settled at her desk, straightened a stack of folders, and opened her email. Her fingers moved automatically, muscle memory guiding her through familiar tasks. For a few minutes, she almost succeeded in pretending everything was normal. Then Luca arrived. He did not greet anyone. He walked past her desk without slowing, his expression unreadable, his suit immaculate, his presence pulling the air tight around him. The faint scent of his cologne lingered long after he disappeared into his office. The door closed, no glance back, no acknowledgement. Olivia's stomach tightened. The silence that followed was worse than confrontation. Luca Rossi was many things, but indifferent was not one of them. When he chose silence, it was deliberate, punishing, She hated how easily it unsettled her. An hour passed, then another. She answered calls, arranged meetings, handled documents, all while her attention drifted again and again to the closed door across from her desk. Her thoughts spiraled despite her efforts to control them. Was he angry? Regretful? Had she gone too far last night? Or had he... The intercom buzzed sharply, cutting through her thoughts. Olivia? Luca's voice came through, calm and flat. My office, now. Her pulse jumped. She rose, smoothed her blouse, and walked to his door, every step measured. When she entered, she found Luca standing by the window, hands in his pockets, the city stretched beneath him like a map he owned. Eric sat to the side, silent, already sensing the tension. Sit, Luca said without turning. She did, back straight, chin lifted. She refused to look like someone waiting to be reprimanded. He took his time before facing her, as if deciding how much control to use and how much to reveal. Tell me about last night, he said. Her jaw tightened. It was my evening off. I'm aware of the calendar, he replied coolly. I'm asking about the man. She met his gaze. A friend, he repeated, eyes darkening. Friends hold hands in public. Her cheeks warmed, anger flaring. You were watching me. I watch what concerns me. And I concern you. The question slipped out sharper than intended. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, stopping in front of his desk, lowering himself into the chair opposite her. You work for me, he said. That makes you visible, vulnerable. You don't put yourself in situations I can't control. The words landed hard. Control. The thing he never named but always practiced. Olivia leaned forward, her voice steady but tight. My job is your concern. My personal life is not a liability you get to manage. You don't understand the risks, Luca said. People watch me. They look for leverage. And you decided I'm leverage now. Her eyes flashed. That's convenient. A flicker crossed his face, something close to irritation, something closer to discomfort. You were in a place I use for business, he said, with a man I don't know. So what? She shot back. I didn't break any rules. I didn't expose you. I had dinner. You broke my trust, he said, the words escaping before he could soften them. She froze. Your trust, she repeated quietly. I didn't know my freedom depended on it. Silence fell heavy between them. Eric shifted in his seat, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Luca stood abruptly, pacing once before stopping in front of her. Stand up, he said. She hesitated, then did. He was close now, too close, his presence overwhelming in the enclosed space. I'm responsible for your safety, he said, voice low. For what happens to you. That's not protection. She replied, that's possession. The words struck deeper than she intended. Luca's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. You think I enjoy this? He asked. You think I like worrying about who touches you in public? The raw edge in his tone surprised her. She held her ground. Then stop pretending this is about security. You were jealous. The room went still. Luca did not deny it. He simply turned away, his shoulders tense, as if the truth had been dragged into the open against his will. If my conditions are unacceptable, he said after a moment, you're free to leave. The words cut clean and sharp. Olivia's chest tightened. Is that what you want? She asked softly. He hesitated, just long enough for her to notice. I want you to think, he said finally. She nodded once, swallowing the ache in her throat. I am thinking, she said. And I don't like who you are when you try to own things that don't belong to you. She left without waiting for dismissal. The rest of the day passed in fragments. Luca remained distant, professional to the point of cruelty. At lunch, he paused at her desk, asked if she had eaten, then walked away before she could answer properly. The gesture confused her more than silence ever could. By late afternoon, exhaustion weighed on her. Her phone buzzed with a message from her cousin, asking about the dinner. Olivia stared at the screen, conflicted. A second date was suggested, almost casually. She hesitated. then typed back a brief response agreeing to think about it. Across the hall, Lucas stood just inside his office door, having stopped short when he heard her voice on the phone. He did not mean to listen, but the words drifted through the space between them. Normal. Nice. Second dinner. Each one settled in his chest like a slow, deliberate wound. He turned away before she noticed him, his thoughts darkening. By evening, the decision was made without being spoken. Olivia would not let him dictate her life. Luca would not pretend he was unaffected. Somewhere between those two truths, a line had been crossed, and neither of them knew yet how impossible it would be to step back. Olivia agreed to the second dinner for reasons she refused to examine too closely. Part of her told herself it was harmless, a quiet attempt to reclaim something simple and ordinary. Another part of her, smaller but louder, wanted to prove that Luca Rossi no longer had the power to unsettle her choices. Either way, the decision felt heavier than it should have. Ethan arrived early, standing when he saw her approach the table. He smiled in that easy, open way that carried no sharp edges, no calculations. He pulled out her chair, waited until she was seated, asked how her day had been, as if the answer truly mattered. Everything about him was gentle, predictable, safe. And that was the problem. They talked about work, about travel, about small frustrations that did not carry consequences. Olivia found herself laughing at the right moments, nodding at the right places. Yet something inside her stayed tense. Her thoughts drifted without permission to a different man. One who never asked how her day had been because he already knew. One who filled silence with pressure instead of comfort. Ethan noticed her distraction. "You seem far away," he said lightly. "I'm just tired," she replied, offering a polite smile. He accepted the explanation without suspicion. That alone should have been reassuring. Across the street, inside a dark car with the engine off, Luca watched the restaurant entrance through tinted glass. He told himself he was not following her. He was assessing the area, checking patterns, making sure nothing was out of place. The lie tasted thin, even to him. When Olivia appeared at the doorway, something tightened in his chest. She wore a simple dress, nothing dramatic, yet it suited her in a way that made his jaw clench. When Ethan stepped closer to greet her, Luca's fingers curled slowly against his palm. "Too clean," Eric muttered from the driver's seat after glancing at the report on his tablet. "No history. No connections. Architect. Volunteers on weekends? Normal," Luca said quietly. Eric glanced at him. "That's bad." Luca didn't answer. He watched Ethan lean forward to speak, watched Olivia smile in response. The image irritated him more than it should have. Normal men did not belong anywhere near her. They didn't know how to protect her. They didn't understand what it meant to be watched. Inside the restaurant, Ethan reached across the table, his fingers brushing Olivia's wrist in an almost hesitant gesture. Luca's breath slowed. His door opened. "Boss," Eric warned softly. I'm not going in," Luca replied. "I'm walking. That's not better." Luca was already out of the car. Olivia sensed him before she saw him, a shift in the air, a familiar weight pressing against her awareness. She turned her head, and there he was, crossing the street with that unhurried confidence that always made people step aside. Her heart dropped to her stomach. Ethan followed her gaze. "Is that—" "Yes," she said quickly. "Please don't engage." But Luca had reached their table. He didn't look at her first. He looked at Ethan, his gaze assessing, dismissive. "Good evening," he said. Ethan stood out of instinct, offering a polite smile. "You must be Luca Rossi." "No," Luca replied calmly. "I don't have to be anything." The tension was immediate, sharp enough to cut. Olivia stood. "Luca, what are you doing? I assume this is the second dinner," he said, finally turning his eyes to her. "That's none of your business," she snapped. "It is." He answered without hesitation. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I don't want trouble." "Then you should leave," Luca said. Olivia's patience snapped. "Stop it, both of you." She turned to Ethan. "Give us a moment, please." Ethan hesitated, searching her face, then nodded. "Take your time." Outside, the night air felt colder. Olivia crossed her arms, more for defense than warmth. "You followed me." "I didn't," Luca said. I knew where you were. That's worse. He stepped closer, his voice lower. Why him? She laughed softly, humorless. Because he's kind. Because he doesn't make me feel like I'm walking on a wire. Luca's eyes darkened. You think I enjoy that? I think you don't know how not to, she replied. He exhaled slowly. You're playing with things you don't understand. And you're using fear as an excuse, she said. For jealousy. The word hung between them. Luca did not deny it. His silence was answer enough. The restaurant door opened. Ethan stepped out, holding his coat. Olivia, he said gently. I should probably explain something. She frowned. Explain what? He glanced at Luca, then back at her. Your cousin asked me to take you out. She said you needed a break. I wasn't trying to pursue anything. The truth landed heavily. Olivia stared at him, stunned. You knew I thought you did, he admitted. I'm sorry. Luca's world tilted. Ethan smiled awkwardly, then turned to Luca. I'm not competition, he said simply. Never was. He walked away without waiting for a response. Silence followed. Olivia looked down at the pavement, shame and relief twisting together. I didn't know, she whispered. I know, Luca replied quietly. He had already asked. Already listened. She lifted her gaze. Then why does this feel worse? Because, he said, voice low, you weren't trying to replace me. You were trying to forget me. Her breath caught. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Luca stepped back. Don't do that again, he said softly. Do what? Try to live without me. He turned and walked away, leaving her under the streetlights, heart pounding, realizing the man she thought she could ignore had already woven himself too deeply into her life to be erased. The days that followed did not explode the way Olivia expected. There were no dramatic confrontations, no raised voices, no sudden confessions. Instead, everything slowed, as if the world had collectively decided to hold its breath. Luca returned to being precise, efficient, distant. He spoke to her only when necessary, his tone neutral, his gaze carefully restrained. Olivia told herself it was easier this way. She was wrong. Distance did not make things safer. It made them sharper. She felt it first in the smallest details. The way security lingered half a second longer when she left the building. The unfamiliar car parked across the street from her apartment 2 nights in a row. The sense that she was being watched. Not constantly, not obviously, but enough to keep her shoulders tight as she walked. She told herself she was imagining it. Working for Luca Rossi did that to people. It taught them to expect danger even when there was none. Luca, however, did not imagine anything. Eric stood in his office with a tablet in hand, his expression serious. It's subtle, he said. No direct threats, no messages. But there's movement. People asking questions they shouldn't. About me, Luca asked, already knowing the answer. About her, Eric replied. Luca's jaw tightened. He turned toward the window, watching the city move below him. He had spent years keeping his private life sealed, invisible, now, without meaning to. He had placed Olivia where the light could reach her, and light, in his world, always attracted shadows. Pull her back, Eric suggested carefully. Out of sight. Luca didn't answer right away. He knew what pulling her back meant. More silence, more distance, more of her looking at him like he was a locked door she could not open. He also knew the alternative was worse. That evening, Olivia left the office later than usual. The building was quieter. The sky outside washed in deep blue. She stepped onto the sidewalk, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. When the feeling returned, that subtle pressure at her back. Footsteps that matched hers a little too closely. She slowed. The steps slowed. Her pulse quickened. Olivia turned down a side street, heart pounding now, breath shallow. The footsteps followed. She reached into her bag for her phone, her fingers shaking as she pressed the screen to wake, before she could dial. A hand appeared in her peripheral vision. Miss Parker. She nearly cried out. The man stepped into view, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket with an earpiece barely visible. Luca's crest was stitched discreetly on his sleeve. "I'm sorry," he said calmly. "Didn't mean to scare you." "Why are you following me?" she demanded, fear turning sharp and angry. "For your safety," he replied. "Someone else was following you first." Her blood went cold. "Who?" He glanced down the street. "Doesn't matter. He won't be back tonight." She stared at him, chest rising and falling. Luca. Of course. She should have known. He had pushed her away at the office, avoided her gaze, acted as if she were nothing more than another name on his schedule. And yet here he was, watching from the shadows. When she reached her apartment, Olivia didn't go inside. She stood in the hallway, staring at her door, then turned around and went back out. Luca was still in his office when she arrived, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, standing over his desk as if he had been there all night. He looked up when the door opened, surprise flickering briefly across his face before control settled back in. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "You shouldn't lie to me," she shot back. He stiffened. "You were followed." "Yes," she said, "and don't pretend you didn't know. You sent someone." His eyes darkened. "I did. Then why didn't you tell me?" Her voice trembled despite her effort to steady it. "Why did you shut me out instead?" He exhaled slowly, turning away. "Because knowing makes it worse." For who, she asked? Me or you? He faced her again, the distance between them heavy. "You're visible now," he said. "People have seen you with me. They're connecting dots. So your solution is to disappear." "Me," she snapped. "Pretend I don't exist." His jaw clenched. "My solution is to keep you alive." The bluntness of it silenced her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she stepped closer, her voice lower. "You don't get to decide that alone." "I do," he said quietly. "When it's my world." "And what about mine?" she demanded. "You think I didn't feel it? The way you pulled away, you think that didn't hurt?" Something in his expression shifted. "I would rather you be angry than afraid," he said. "I was afraid anyway," she replied. "Just not of the right thing." The truth settled between them. Luca looked at her, really looked, and the conflict in his eyes was unmistakable. "I don't want you near this," he said. "Near me." "Then say it," she challenged softly. "Tell me to leave." He didn't. She turned toward the door. "I won't be protected in secret," she said. "If I'm in danger, I deserve to know why." "Olivia," he said, her name catching in his throat. She stopped but did not turn around. "You don't get to choose safety for me by taking away my choice." She left him standing there, the echo of her words settling deep in his chest. Luca sank into his chair slowly, hands clasped, realizing with a clarity that frightened him more than any threat keeping her close put her at risk. Pushing her away might destroy her trust. Either way, the cost was no longer theoretical. For the first time in years, Luca Rossi understood that power did not protect him from loss. It only made him capable of causing it. The invitation arrived the next morning, in a thick, cream-colored envelope placed neatly at the center of Olivia's desk. No explanation. No signature beyond a single initial at the bottom of the card, L. The charity gala was one of the most visible events of the season, attended by donors, politicians, executives, and the kind of people who watched without blinking. Olivia stared at the embossed letters longer than necessary, her heart tightening with a mixture of apprehension and something dangerously close to anticipation. When Luca appeared at her desk an hour later, he didn't comment on the invitation. He simply said, "You'll attend with me." His voice carried no command this time, only certainty. Olivia studied his face, searching for the man who had pushed her away the night before, who had chosen silence over honesty. What she saw instead was resolve edged with tension. She nodded. The decision, once made, felt irreversible. The night of the gala arrived wrapped in cold air and bright lights. Luca waited at the curb as Olivia stepped out of her building, the city reflecting off the polished surface of his car. When he saw her, something in his expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. She wore a dark, elegant dress that moved with her, simple in design, yet striking in its restraint. Her hair fell in soft waves, framing her face in a way that made his chest tighten. "You look," he began, then paused. You look right. She smiled faintly. That's the nicest almost compliment I've had all week. His hand rested briefly at the small of her back as he helped her into the car. The contact warm, grounding, gone too quickly. During the drive, neither spoke much. The silence was not uncomfortable, only charged, filled with unspoken understanding and the awareness that tonight would change something between them. The venue was alive with movement when they arrived. Cameras flashed as Luca stepped out, then turned to offer Olivia his hand. The moment she placed hers in his, she felt the weight of attention shift toward them. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Whispers followed as they crossed the entrance together. She sensed Luca lean slightly closer, his voice low. Focus on me, he said. Nothing else matters. Inside, the room glowed with soft light and polished surfaces. Luca moved through the crowd with practiced ease, greeting familiar faces, accepting handshakes, offering brief nods. Olivia stayed at his side, handing him details when needed, murmuring names and reminders only he seemed to hear. They moved as a unit, seamless, efficient, unmistakably connected. People noticed. A woman Olivia didn't recognize smiled knowingly as they passed. A man joked that Luca had finally brought someone worth talking about. Luca responded with his usual restraint, but his hand found Olivia's waist more than once, steadying her, claiming space without words. Each touch sent a quiet spark through her, a reminder that despite the distance he had forced between them, he was very aware of her presence. Later, when the music softened and the crowd thinned toward the dance floor, Luca turned to her. Dance, he said, not asking. She hesitated, glancing around at the watching eyes. People will talk. They already are, he replied. At least let them be right. He extended his hand. She took it. The dance was slow, measured. Luca pulled her closer than protocol required, his hand firm at her waist, her palm resting against his shoulder. The world narrowed to the space between them, to the rhythm beneath their feet. Olivia felt his breath near her temple, steady but controlled. She tilted her head slightly, meeting his gaze. You're tense, she said softly. So are you, he replied. They moved in silence, bodies aligned, their closeness intimate enough to feel dangerous. Luca's eyes softened as he looked at her, a flicker of something unguarded passing through before his expression tightened again. He leaned in, his voice barely audible. If I cross this line tonight, he said, there's no pretending afterward. Her heart raced. Then don't pretend, she whispered. For a moment, it seemed he might kiss her. The air between them grew thick, charged with everything they had not said. Then Luca stepped back, just enough to break the spell, his jaw tightening as if he were restraining himself with effort. They left earlier than expected. Outside, the cameras followed them until the car door closed, sealing them into quiet darkness. The drive back was heavier than before. Luca's gaze remained forward, his hands steady on the wheel. People saw. Olivia said gently. I know, he replied. And now they won't unsee. When he stopped in front of her building, he didn't turn off the engine right away. You shouldn't walk alone tonight, he said. There will be security. You decided that without asking me. She said, not unkindly. Yes, he admitted, because tonight made you visible. She met his eyes. You brought me. I wanted you beside me. He said, I still do. The honesty in his voice surprised them both. Olivia opened the door, then paused. Then don't disappear again, she said. Not after this. He watched her for a long moment. I won't, he said quietly. Not like before? She nodded and stepped out, her heart pounding as she walked inside. Luca waited until the lights of her apartment flickered on before driving away. Back in his penthouse, he opened his laptop to a flood of images already circulating online. Photos of them entering the gala, dancing, his hand on her waist, her face turned toward him. Headlines speculated, comments dissected. Eric's message arrived seconds later. She's visible now. Luca stared at the screen, understanding settling in with brutal clarity. Bringing Olivia into the light had felt right. Necessary, but light cast shadows, and shadows remembered him well. Tonight, he had claimed her without words. Now, the cost of that choice was coming into focus, and it would demand more than restraint. It would demand a decision. The morning after the gala arrived quietly, almost deceptively so. Olivia woke with the echo of music still lingering in her chest. The memory of Luca's hand at her waist vivid enough to make her smile before she realized she was smiling. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to believe that something had shifted for good, that the careful balance between them had finally tilted toward honesty. By the time she reached the office, that illusion had begun to fracture. Luca's door was closed. The blinds were drawn. His schedule, usually precise to the minute, had been wiped clean for the day. Meetings canceled, calls postponed. The air on the executive floor felt colder, heavier, as if everyone sensed the tension but did not know its source. Olivia sat at her desk, trying to focus on routine tasks, yet every unanswered question pressed harder with each passing minute. He didn't look at her once. When he finally emerged hours later, he walked past her desk with the same controlled detachment he had used days before. No greeting, no acknowledgement of the night they had shared under 100 watching eyes. It felt deliberate, calculated, like a door quietly closing. Olivia's chest tightened. She waited until his footsteps faded before allowing the hurt to surface. She told herself not to chase him, not to demand explanations. She had already learned what pushing him could lead to. Still, the silence cut deeper than anger ever could. By late afternoon, she could no longer pretend to concentrate. She left the building earlier than planned, craving air, space, something that belonged solely to her. The city greeted her with familiar noise, the comfort of anonymity she had not realized she missed until now. She walked toward a nearby cafe, her shoulders gradually relaxing. That was when the feeling returned. Not sudden, not obvious, just a faint awareness at her back. The sense that her solitude was being shared without permission. She slowed. The rhythm behind her adjusted. Her pulse quickened, not with panic but with recognition. She had felt this before. Olivia turned a corner, pretending to check her phone. The presence remained. When she stopped, the steps stopped. Her breath caught. Miss Parker. She spun around, heart racing, only to find herself facing a man she did not recognize. He was average in appearance, forgettable in the way people learned to be when they wanted to disappear into crowds. He offered a polite smile that did nothing to ease the tension curling in her stomach. "Do I know you?" she asked, forcing her voice to stay level. "No," he replied. "But someone knows you." Before she could react, another figure stepped between them. One of Luca's men, tall and unmistakable, his presence shifting the balance instantly. The stranger took a step back, expression cooling. A moment later, he turned and walked away without another word. Olivia stood frozen, her heart hammering. The guard glanced at her. "You shouldn't walk alone," he said gently. "Not now." Understanding hit her with sharp clarity. Luca. He had known. He had seen the danger closing in and chosen distance instead of explanation, protection instead of trust. She returned to the office without thinking, anger fueling her steps. Luca's door was unlocked this time. She pushed it open without knocking. He stood by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled, phone in his hand. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face before settling into something guarded. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "You don't get to decide that anymore," she replied, her voice shaking despite her effort to control it. "Someone followed me." His expression darkened instantly. "Did he touch you?" "No," she said. "Because your guard stepped in." Relief flashed across his face, quickly replaced by frustration. "I told them to stay close." "And you didn't think to tell me," she demanded. "You thought shutting me out was better?" He set his phone down slowly. "I didn't want you to worry. You didn't want to deal with the consequences." She shot back. "There's a difference." Luca stepped closer, his voice low. "This is exactly why I needed distance." "No," she said. "This is why I needed honesty." The words hung between them. Luca looked away, jaw tight. "People saw us last night," he said. "They're talking, watching, testing boundaries. And your solution is to pretend I don't exist," she asked softly. "To erase me from your life until it's convenient? I'm trying to keep you alive," he replied. The bluntness of it stopped her cold. She stared at him, anger giving way to something heavier. "You don't get to protect me by making decisions for me," she said. "That's not safety. That's control." His shoulders tensed. "In my world, control is survival. And what about mine?" she asked. "You brought me into the light. You danced with me. You let them see. And now you want to hide me again." Silence stretched between them. Luca's gaze softened. Conflict etched into his features. "I made a mistake," he said quietly. "I shouldn't have done that." Her breath caught. "You shouldn't regret wanting me beside you." "I regret the danger it put you in," he replied. "Nothing else." She took a step back, the space between them suddenly vast. "Then stop deciding for me," she said. "If I'm in danger, I deserve to know. I deserve to choose." He closed his eyes briefly, as if weighing something too heavy to say aloud. "If I let you choose," he said, "you might choose to stay. And that scares you more than losing me?" she asked. He didn't answer. The truth lay in his silence. Olivia nodded once, the movement small but final. "I won't be protected in the dark," she said. "If you want me near you, you don't get to hide me. And if you don't—" She paused, steadying herself. "Then say it." Luca opened his eyes, pain flickering across his face. He said nothing. She turned and walked out, her steps measured despite the ache spreading through her chest. Luca remained where he was, watching the door long after it closed. For the first time since the gala, he allowed himself to feel the weight of his choice. Distance had always been his shield. Tonight, it felt dangerously close to becoming his greatest mistake. The silence between them did not last. It couldn't. Silence only worked when both sides agreed to pretend it meant nothing. Olivia refused to do that again. She didn't come to the office the next morning. For the first time since she had started working for Luca, she took a personal day without explanation. She turned off her phone and stayed inside her apartment. Sitting by the window, watching the city move as if it belonged to someone else. The distance gave her clarity she hadn't expected. It wasn't Luca's power that frightened her. It was the way he kept choosing for her, convinced fear was kindness. By late afternoon, her phone buzzed. A single message lit up the screen. "Come see me tonight." No command, no justification, just an invitation, heavy with intent. She arrived after dark. The building was quiet, the executive floor nearly empty. Luca's office lights were on, spilling a soft glow into the hallway. She paused outside the door, hand hovering over the handle, then pushed it open without knocking. He was standing near the desk, jacket off, tie loosened, sleeves rolled. He looked tired in a way she hadn't seen before, the kind of fatigue that came from fighting oneself rather than the world. He turned when he heard her, his eyes settling on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You shouldn't have been followed," he said immediately. "That's not why I'm here," she replied. He nodded once, accepting the correction. "I know." She stepped closer, stopping just short of the space where things became dangerous. "You don't get to disappear every time you're afraid," she said. "You don't get to pull me close and then pretend I'm the problem." His jaw tightened. "I never said you were. You didn't have to," she answered. "You showed me." Luca exhaled slowly and turned away, pressing his hands against the edge of the desk. "You think I don't see what I'm doing?" he asked quietly. "You think I don't hate it?" She softened despite herself. "Then stop." He laughed once, bitter and restrained. "I don't know how." She moved closer. "Then learn." He turned back to her, the distance between them gone. "You don't understand what being near me costs," he said. "Every person I care about becomes a point of pressure, a weakness someone will test." "And you think pushing me away makes that better?" she asked. "I think it keeps you alive." The words landed heavy. Olivia stared at him, seeing the truth beneath the control, beneath the distance, fear, not of losing power, of losing her. "Say it," she said softly. "Say what you're really afraid of." He hesitated. The room felt smaller, the city outside distant and irrelevant. "I'm afraid," he admitted at last, voice low, stripped of arrogance, "that if I let myself feel everything I feel for you, I won't be able to protect you. Or myself. Her heart tightened. You don't get to love safely, she said gently. Not you. He met her gaze, eyes dark and searching. And you don't get to choose danger for yourself, just to prove a point. I'm not choosing danger, she replied. I'm choosing honesty. Silence fell between them again, but this time it was different. He stepped closer, stopping when their breath began to mingle. If I tell you everything, he said, you might walk away. She didn't look away. If you don't, she said, I will. The truth shifted something inside him. Luca closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with resolve that felt heavier than fear. People are watching, he said. They've been watching since the gala, testing my reactions, seeing what I'll protect. And she asked, and they noticed you, he said. Which means they'll try to get to me through you. Olivia absorbed the words without flinching. Then stop pretending this is only your fight. He studied her, searching for hesitation, doubt, anything that might let him retreat again. He found none. You don't know what you're asking, he said. I'm asking you to stop deciding for me, she replied. I'm asking you to trust me enough to stand where I choose. His voice dropped. And if where you choose is beside me, then you don't get to hide me, she said. You don't get to lock me out when things get hard. He took another step, closing the space completely. If I let you stay, he said, I won't do it halfway. Her breath hitched. I don't want halfway. The tension between them tightened, sharp and undeniable. Luca lifted his hand slowly, stopping just short of touching her cheek, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. I can't promise you safety, he said quietly. I can promise you truth. That's all I want, she whispered. For a moment, it seemed he might kiss her. The air trembled with it. Instead, he lowered his hand and stepped back, frustration and restraint warring in his expression. Not yet, he said. But soon. She nodded, understanding the weight behind his words. Then don't push me away again. He met her gaze. I won't. They stood there, neither moving. The line between them no longer blurred, but redrawn with intention. Olivia turned toward the door, stopping just before leaving. I'm not afraid of your world, she said. I'm afraid of being shut out of it. When she left, Luca remained standing in the center of the room, her words echoing through him. He had spent his life controlling everything that mattered. Tonight, he understood something that unsettled him far more than any threat. The only thing he could not control was how deeply he was already losing her unless he finally chose to stop running. Luca did not sleep that night. He sat on the edge of his bed long after the city had gone quiet, replaying every word Olivia had said, every look she had given him before she walked out of his office. He had always believed fear was a weakness to be crushed or controlled. Now it sat inside his chest, heavy and insistent, refusing to be ignored. Not fear of enemies, fear of himself. Fear that the one thing he wanted most was also the thing that could undo him. By morning, a decision had been made, though he had not yet spoken it aloud. Olivia arrived at the office expecting distance again. She braced herself for cold professionalism, for the careful avoidance that had become Luca's shield. Instead, she found him waiting at her desk. No jacket, no phone in hand, just Luca, standing still as if he had been there longer than necessary. You're early, she said cautiously. You're late, he replied. The edge was gone from his voice. What remained was something quieter, heavier. She studied him, searching for signs of retreat. She found none. You said you wouldn't push me away again. She said, I won't, he answered simply. But I need you to understand what staying means. Her pulse quickened. Then tell me. He gestured toward his office. This time, she followed without hesitation. Inside, the door closed behind them, sealing the room from the rest of the floor. Luca didn't sit. Neither did she. He spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. There are people I'm cutting out of my life, he said. Connections I've kept because they were useful, not because they were safe. That changes now. Because of me, she asked quietly. Because of us, he corrected. Because I won't build anything with you on a foundation that can collapse under your feet? The admission tightened her chest. She had expected resistance, not sacrifice. That won't make things clean overnight. She said, I know, he replied. It will make them smaller, quieter, less dangerous. She took a step closer. And if it doesn't, then I deal with it, he said. With you knowing? With you choosing whether to stay? The words mattered more than he realized. Olivia exhaled slowly, tension easing from her shoulders. That's all I wanted, she said. To choose. The space between them felt charged, the air thick with everything they had held back. Luca's gaze dropped briefly to her lips, then lifted again, restrained. If I cross this line now, he said, voice low, there's no pretending this is something else. Her heart pounded. I'm done pretending. He stepped closer. She didn't move. His hand lifted again, this time touching her cheek, warm and careful, as if she might break. She leaned into the contact without thinking, her breath catching. For a moment, he hesitated, the last of his restraint fighting to hold. Then he gave in. The kiss was slow at first, almost reverent, as if he were asking permission with every breath. When she kissed him back, the control he had clung to fractured. Luca pulled her closer, his hand firm at her waist, anchoring her to him. The world narrowed to heat and closeness, to the way his breath shook against her skin. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. I knew it, he murmured. I knew it would feel like this, like what she whispered, like something I won't walk away from. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. The intimacy lingered in the space between them, deep and undeniable. Luca drew back just enough to look at her, his thumb brushing her cheek. I'm not stepping back again, he said. Not unless you ask me to. I won't, she replied. The days that followed were quieter, but no less intense. Luca moved pieces behind the scenes, ending meetings early, severing ties that had once seemed untouchable. He didn't explain every detail, but he didn't hide the effort either. Olivia watched him change not through grand gestures, but through small, deliberate choices. Fewer late nights with questionable allies, more transparency, more listening. They were careful at the office. Glances lingered, hands brushed, words carried double meanings. But the restraint was chosen now, not enforced, and that made all the difference. One evening, rain pressed against the windows as the floor emptied around them. Luca called her into his office without pretense. They worked side by side at the conference table, sharing documents, murmuring comments. At some point, Olivia leaned over to reach a file. Luca's hand met hers at the same moment. Neither pulled away. He looked at her, a question in his eyes. She answered by staying exactly where she was. He stood, closing the distance until she felt the table against her back. His hand rose again, slower this time, as if he were memorizing the moment. Tell me to stop, he said softly. She didn't. The kiss was deeper now, less restrained, shaped by days of tension and resolve. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Luca rested his forehead against hers again. This doesn't make things easier, he said. No, she agreed. It makes them real. Later, when he drove her home himself, no guards, no distance, the city passing quietly outside the windows. Luca spoke without looking at her. If this puts you in danger, I'll never forgive myself. She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. Then don't make choices without me, she said. We face it together. He squeezed her hand once, hard enough to promise he understood. That night, alone again. Luca stood by his window, watching the city lights blur beneath the rain. He had crossed a line he had sworn never to approach, not because he was reckless, but because for the first time, the risk felt worth it, and he knew with absolute clarity that there would be no turning back now. The world did not slow down for Luca's decision. If anything, it seemed to accelerate, as if testing whether he meant what he had begun. The days after he crossed the line with Olivia were marked by quiet shifts that carried enormous weight. Meetings were canceled without explanation. Old associates were kept waiting, then dismissed entirely. Routes were changed. Money was moved. Names were removed from lists that had not changed in years. People noticed. Eric stood in Luca's office one evening, tablet in hand, his expression carefully neutral. "You're closing doors that don't reopen," he said. "Some of them won't take this quietly." Luca didn't look up from the document he was signing. They never do. And if they push back, Luca finally lifted his gaze. Then I'll know exactly who they are. Outside the office, Olivia sensed the pressure long before anyone explained it to her. The building felt different, tighter. Security doubled without announcement. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms she used to move through freely. She understood enough to know this wasn't coincidence. This was fallout. One afternoon, as she was leaving a meeting, a woman she didn't recognize brushed past her, whispering just loud enough to be heard. "Careful who you stand next to." Olivia didn't turn around. She didn't slow her steps, but the words followed her all the way back to her desk. That night, Luca drove her home himself again. The city lights slid past in silence, the weight between them unspoken, but present. When he parked, he didn't turn off the engine right away. "Things are changing faster than I planned," he said quietly. She studied his profile, the tension in his jaw, the careful way he chose his words. "Is that your way of warning me?" she asked. "It's my way of being honest," he replied. "Some people don't like that you exist in my life." She reached out, resting her hand over his. "I'm not invisible," she said. "I won't pretend to be—" He looked at her then, truly looked, as if memorizing the certainty in her eyes. "That's what scares them," he said. "And me." The test came sooner than either of them expected. 2 nights later, Luca was called away unexpectedly. A meeting that should have been routine ran long, tension thick enough to taste. Olivia stayed at the office, working through documents. The building nearly empty. Rain pressed against the windows, muting the city below. She didn't hear the footsteps until they stopped outside her door. A knock followed. Controlled? Deliberate? Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. "Who is it?" she asked. "A friend." A man's voice answered calmly. "We need to talk." She didn't open the door. She reached for her phone instead. Before she could dial, the voice continued, softer now. "You should tell Luca he can't erase people without consequences." Security arrived seconds later, fast and efficient. The man was gone by the time they reached the hall. The message, however, lingered. Luca arrived less than 10 minutes after she called him. He found her standing in the middle of his office, pale but steady, refusing to sit. The moment he saw her unharmed, something fierce and uncontrolled flashed across his face. "Did he touch you?" he demanded. "No," she said. He wanted to be seen. Luca's jaw tightened. He turned away, anger radiating from him in sharp waves. "This is exactly what I was trying to prevent. And this is exactly why you can't," she replied. "You don't get to protect me by pretending this world won't reach me." He faced her again, eyes dark. "This won't stop," he said. "Not until I finish cutting ties. Not until they understand." "And what if they never do?" she asked. Silence stretched between them, heavy and honest. Luca stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Then I have to choose how far I'm willing to go." Her chest tightened. "And where does that leave us?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out, cupping her face with hands that trembled just slightly. "I won't ask you to stay if this costs you more than you're willing to give," he said. "I won't trap you in my decisions." She held his gaze. "You're not trapping me," she said. "You're finally letting me see the truth." He exhaled slowly. "If you walk away now," he said, "no one will blame you. I won't stop you." The offer was real. She could feel it. This was the line, clearly drawn, safety on one side, him on the other. Olivia took his hands in hers. "I didn't choose you because you're powerful," she said softly. "I chose you because you're trying to change. And because I trust the man you're becoming more than the world you're leaving behind." Something in Luca broke open at her words. He pulled at her into his arms, holding her with a fierce tenderness that bordered on desperation. "Then you stay," he said into her hair. "And I finish this." They stood like that for a long moment, the storm outside echoing the one still moving around them. Luca knew now that there was no path forward that didn't demand a final reckoning. The people watching him would push harder. The shadows would not retreat quietly. But he also knew something else, something steadier than fear. For the first time, he wasn't fighting to protect control. He was fighting to protect a future, and that meant the last move he made would have to be definitive. The end did not arrive with gunfire or headlines. It came quietly, the way real endings often do, through decisions made behind closed doors and lines crossed that could never be uncrossed again. Luca finished it the only way he knew how, cleanly, decisively, without spectacle. The last meetings were brief. The last warnings were unnecessary. He withdrew from alliances that thrived on fear, redirected resources into legitimate channels, and let it be known, without ever saying her name, that the leverage people thought they had no longer existed. Some doors slammed. Others locked themselves. A few shadows tested him one final time and learned there was nothing left to bargain with. When it was over, the city didn't notice, but the pressure eased. The air around Olivia felt lighter. The footsteps that once lingered behind her disappeared. Security returned to being invisible. The quiet was different now, not tense, not waiting to break, just quiet. Luca didn't tell her everything. He told her enough. They stood together on his balcony one evening, the skyline glowing beneath them, the wind cool against their skin. He rested his hands on the railing, watching the lights, while she leaned beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "It's done," he said simply. She studied his face, searching for the man who had once measured the world in threats and control. What she saw instead was exhaustion, relief, and something softer she had learned to recognize as hope. "Are you sure?" she asked. "As sure as I can be," he replied. "The rest will take time, but the worst of it is behind us." She nodded. "Then so are we." He turned to her, surprised. "What do you mean, she said gently. "We don't have to keep bracing for impact." He let out a slow breath, as if releasing a habit he had carried for years. "I don't know how to live without bracing," he admitted. She smiled faintly. "You'll learn." The invitation came a week later, handwritten, simple, unexpected. Luca took her back to the restaurant where it had all begun. The same entrance, the same quiet elegance. The table by the window was waiting, bathed in the same warm light that had once set everything in motion. "This feels familiar," she said as they sat. "It should," he replied. "I wanted it to." They didn't order right away. Luca reached across the table, his fingers resting over hers, grounding and steady. "Do you remember what I asked myself that night?" he asked. She nodded. "You kept asking who he was." "Yes," he said. "And I was wrong to ask that question." She tilted her head. "What should you have asked?" He held her gaze. "I should have asked who I wanted to be to you." Her breath caught. He stood then, moving around the table, the room so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. When he stopped in front of her, he didn't kneel right away. He simply took her hands in his. "I won't promise you a perfect life," he said. "I won't promise you that nothing will ever reach us again, but I can promise you this. I will choose you every day, openly, without hiding, without pretending I can do this alone." He lowered himself then, the movement slow and deliberate, and opened a small, unassuming box. Inside was a ring, elegant, understated, chosen with care rather than spectacle. "This isn't a command," he continued quietly. "It's not a shield. It's a question." Tears gathered in her eyes. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "I know," he replied. "That's why it matters." She didn't hesitate. She didn't need time. She had already answered in 1,000 quiet ways. "Yes," she said. "It's always been yes." The relief on his face was almost painful to witness. He slid the ring onto her finger with hands that were steady despite everything he felt, then stood and pulled her into his arms. Their kiss was slow, unhurried, filled with gratitude rather than urgency. The restaurant seemed to fade around them, leaving only the truth they had chosen. Life after that didn't become easy. It became honest. They moved together into a shared space, into a rhythm that balanced work and quiet mornings, late nights and laughter that came easier than either of them expected. Luca learned to let go of constant vigilance. Olivia learned when to push and when to simply hold him until the tension eased. They argued, they compromised, they listened. At work, people noticed the change. Luca was still respected, still feared in some circles. But the edge had softened. He delegated more. He trusted more. And when someone asked, quietly, who the woman beside him was, he answered without hesitation. "My partner," he said. One Sunday morning, Olivia stood in his kitchen wearing one of his shirts, sunlight spilling across the counter as she poured coffee. Luca watched from the doorway, arms crossed, expression relaxed in a way it never had been before. "You're staring," she said without turning. "I'm allowed," he replied. "You said yes." She smiled, handing him a mug. "Any regrets?" He took the cup, then her hand, pulling her gently into his space. "Only that I waited so long to stop asking the wrong question." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. "And now," he said, kissing her hair, "I know exactly who I am to you." She looked up at him, her smile soft and certain. "You're the man I chose." And for the first time in his life, Luca Rossi knew that was more than enough.